In this episode I want to check out a little bit Photomatix4, which I like a lot. But of course I have to say, in all fairness, there are so many applications available who do a great job, and of course I don't want to discuss each and every of these. When you go to hdrlabs.com, you find under tools the best list that I can think of, and users vote for these applications. You get a little glimpse if people like it or not, but that has nothing to do with the quality. It's mostly, from my point of view, how user-friendly these applications are. But that's only my opinion. Okay, test it out. Most of them are free to test, and that's always the best if it fits to you. Anyway, Photomatix, here we go. And we have Photomatix4 4.2. And I have set up here a strong tint with the color temperature. And I want to show you that, of course, again, if you haven't seen the episode before. I have set up here a value that is maybe really way beyond anything normal. And color temperature is not only cold and warm, it's also tint. And this is like a cross. The sliders here are parallel, but normally warm and cold, and then tint goes up and down. And then you can create a huge field out of these sliders, and that is very important. So I have set up here something that is beyond my taste. Maybe sometimes it fits, but some little white should be somewhere in the picture. Okay, select all, synchronize, and I go with this completely wrong thing into my erase. I press done, so it stays here. It should update a little bit, gets more worse than before. And then we can do something which I like a lot. I go here from Adobe Bridge, move it to the side, and here I have already open Photomatix. And then I click here on Load Bracket Photos, which gives me the option to process one image at a time. And we have here also batch operations, which is nice. A very, very important feature if you do this work more often. I click once, I click the second time down. So I have Bridge activated and grab these guys and then let go of it. That's all. So I want to see, of course, my 32-bit because I'm a 3D artist here at the moment, and 32-bit is all I care about. I don't want to have any tone mapping or stuff here. So align sources, we can uncheck this because we wouldn't do anything freehand when we want to do professional HDRI. This is really not an option for professional work, to hold the camera and hope for the best because it aligns. No, there's a parallax in it and it won't. And if you shake a little bit, then you get motion blur in it. Even a little bit changes the values. So tripod is absolutely mandatory. Remove ghosts. If you are on a set and there is something moving, ask a grip if you can't stop it. Because remove ghosts, which is such a great feature if you are a photographer or an artist for 2D art. But in the moment you want to have pure values, any ghosting, and that means something is moving while you're shooting the sequence, that's not an option. Of course, there are trees in the wind that you can't stop. That's then a little bit more difficult. But remove ghosts as a standard destroys all the values. You get less and less dynamic partially. Maybe on some points you get nice dynamics, and so it reads out very nicely, but remove ghosts is normally not an option for 3D. Reduce noise. Yes and no. Normally you should shoot that you get no noise. That is of course not always possible. Yes. And so underexposed images, that means the darker ones, tend to have more noise. Also, if you dial in your ISO too high, that's not normally an option. That's something that makes the quality also lower. Note that any high ISO reduces your dynamic range anyway. So why bother in the first place? Sometimes you need to do that, of course. I know that, and there's sometimes no way around. But to do it on all images, I wouldn't do that because it blurs it, of course. So underexposed, that might help a little bit, because noise is always the enemy of dynamic. It's not fun, and when you pull it out, it's not simple. Reduce chromatic aberration. The cheaper the lens, the smaller the sensor is, the more you might need this. If you can avoid it, do it, because anything that changes the picture will change the dynamic, will change the quality. So I stay then here as shot, or I can set up something else, and I can go here to custom. I stay here normally with ProPhoto. Adobe RGB is also okay, but sRGB shouldn't be an option. It's not really a huge gamut that you have with it, and it doesn't save time. So pre-process, and we will see if we get discolorization in our picture. And that is important to check before you start a long series of work. The application might change, and you have to know it. Any update can change your workflow. Every time an update comes, you have to check everything. Sounds boring, I know. But I have to talk a little bit until the noise reduction is done, merging to HDRI. You see, the noise reduction needs nearly as much as time as merging to HDRI. So no noise is maybe the best option. So even if I had set up this to custom, it doesn't take any notice of the settings. So you have to set up, of course, this little guy here after you have put this in, the color temperature, and there is no tint option. So shoot carefully that you have maybe everything in it. One note. If you think, okay, it can't read tint, it can't read color, maybe I should use filters in front of the lens. Filters do something that was maybe okay in the old black and white film time when we shoot and we needed to maybe eliminate very bright skies or something like that, or we wanted to have more contrast or whatever. But as long as you have a Bayern pattern where you have specialized pixels for green, for red or for blue, and we have 2 greens for each pair of red and blue, then, for example, a red filter would give light only to a quarter of all pixels. So your 20 megapixel camera has all of a sudden only 5 megapixels anymore. And the results get really blurry. That's a big no. So any color change in front of the lens is a big no. Like polarization filters is a big no, especially when you try to use them as ND filters. I would really try to avoid it. And when you see my photography series, you might note even more why I don't like them so much. Anyway, so try to get good light in the way it is possible. And if you really have to get this colorization in the picture, you have to save the TIFF file out of the Adobe Bridge or Camera Raw and then go to Photomatix. But please remember, in the moment we use an integer TIFF, we use a gamma-based format. And we take the raw information, which is linear, what I have explained. Each stop goes a little bit more. So the pixel values are completely different stored in a raw format because the sensor writes it out in linear light. And then we go to TIFF in gamma-based, and then we go into Photomatix, and this tries again to straighten this to linear light. So we have the second conversion inside, and then it calculates all of this and gives us out an OpenEXR file. And I have asked the good people at Photomatix, is it better to go with RAW into it or with a TIFF file? And of course, some people have a strong opinion about this, but the clear and short answer from Photomatix was RAW is linear light and linear light is preferable. And of course, what you get from the sensor is for the application the best way to go. When you save then this image here finally as OpenEXR, you should go here to the preferences. Very important, go to files. And default 32-bit that's my little win. I fought for this a long time to get it as default, because normally it was radians, which is only an 8-bit times 4 format. A clever one, a genius strike 20 years ago. Now don't use it. And TIFF is of course floating point, also in linear format, but it is not small. Many applications can read it, but OpenEXR is industry standard, and so this is my favorite and I will fight for it. And when you use OpenEXR, don't check this on, even if you're on a Mac. And I like Mac, as you know, but don't check this on, because it normalizes the OpenEXR file. The brightest value in the picture becomes then 1.0. Sounds maybe okay, because you can fix this later. You will not lose precision over that. But if you do in panorama and you have many images, the one with the sun will be the darkest then, because the sun will then normalize to 1. Not fun when you do panoramas. It's per panorama with 24 images, roughly a half hour to get this straight. I have done it several hundred times. So don't do this, do this. Okay, that's all. And then we come now to the batch modes. I switch this here off and I have to clean up here that mess. See you in a sec. So the files are clean again. I have tossed away the XML files. That's the fastest and easiest way. And I have selected here randomly 3x3 raw files. And what I have suggested before is not working for the batch bracket photos, because when I go here to Bridge and put this here in, it will not take these images. So I have to go here into batch processing of bracketing photos, and then I go here to select files, and then I can use here whatever I have selected before. Maybe I have to go into the right files here, and that is photo and HDR for cinema, this cinema folder here. And then I go here down, and here I am already. So when you have 5 digits of images every year, then it's sometimes a little bit complicated to get all sorted out. So I use here now 3x3 groups. I choose them blindly. I haven't pre-selected them in Bridge. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Okay, so I select these 3 different ones, and then I have to say how many I have selected. So I can have take all, that means only 1, 2, 3, as I have here, and I can have up to 19 here, of course. And then we have here also an advanced mode that takes bracketing, have between 3 and 3 frames. They are only 2 or longer seconds apart from each other. This is pretty much how Adobe does this as well, but I never had really luck with it to just toss a whole folder and then hope for the best. Doesn't work for me. So maybe you have more structure in your files, especially with time, that you have long distances between and short distances inside of the sequence. Doesn't work sometimes for me, and so on. That could work nicely, but I go here mostly that I choose only the ones that have maybe 15, then I have the one with 9, and so on. Mostly just one single number. I shoot the series all the time the same. Then I have these guys here inside, and what we can choose here is what we want to have as output. Tone map is something that takes time, of course. Sometimes it's very interesting for the artist as a 2D artist, but normally for a 3D artist it's not. But it's always a nice preview file. That is what I use them mostly for. And then we can have something where we can say, okay, we shoot them all with some kind of 2 values between, or when we have no idea, it's just easy to adjust. We can say which white balance, which degree Kelvin we want to have, or if we take just something that the camera gives us, and in which color primaries we want to open them. That means the raw goes into ProPhoto in this case, and from there we go then into the merge. So I leave it here for a moment because it's endless if I go too long, especially these guys here. And what I would suggest highly, you have a customized location. That means just give it a name and have a folder for that. And then naming an output option, very important. To have here maybe the sequence as name. And then what I like to do is always put the lens length into it, 70 millimeters or 35 or something like that, because after a while you have maybe a folder filled with something, and in HDRI you get rid of all the metadata. So when you want to merge it then in PTGUI, you have no idea, you have to go back, which image was it, and so on. And this helps me here most of the time really to get fast in PTGUI, because then I can take a look, oh, 35 was it, and I give in 35 full frame and I'm done. Okay, so this would be the naming convention. I go here with OpenEXR, of course, and if you have no tone mapping here, for example, the JPEG will not work for you. And that's pretty much all. And then you set run and it goes, and it takes always 3 packages, and whoops. And when it's done, it gives you on the end even a link where it has stored all of that. And based on the little suffix that we have given, we can search them even. So this sums it up, and thanks for listening.